All right, now we're going to look at projection mapping, the other side of the coin. So we looked at in the last video how to explode an object and then stitch it back together using automatic mapping. And that works quite well for inorganic objects. Some things like, like let's say a box or a cardboard box or a dresser or something like that. But when it comes down to having like softer edges or let's say a little bit more complexities, we might want to use planar mapping. And here's the kicker. We use them in combination with each other. We don't use just one. So there's no right answer. It's just the preferred answer. Okay. In my opinion, I have like the ability to use all three mapping: UV, W unwrapping, planar mapping, and automatic mapping. And I am a ninja when it comes down to UVs. I don't even think about doing them anymore. It's just one of those things you do. But I can quickly get through it, and you don't get stressed because you know all three methods. So I want to cover all three, and as you can go on, you can start developing your own the ability to use all three together in combinations depending upon the scenario. Okay, so planar mapping works kind of like this. Here's a box. Okay, and I'm going to go into rendering editors, go to hypershade, go to textures, and materials. Middle mouse button, click and drag this out to the object. Okay, so there we go. So let's say this had really bad UVs. I'll just make some really bad UVs. There you go. Those are pretty bad UVs. This surface is non-uniformed. Some of the faces don't even have the correct texture applied to them. So we can dictate this to be bad. Also, it could get worse depending if I extrude it a few times. Let's look at the UVs. Well, the UVs clearly don't match a box. In fact, I have this thing going on. And sometimes you'll even see something like this, where the UVs are not laid out correctly. They're not uniform. They have these colors. In this case, I know that there are some overlapping UVs. I can see that the texture is really jacked up on it. So depending upon where you got the object, where you started with, was it a box to begin with, you might see scenarios that look like this. So projection mapping is just this. I can look at the object in a camera. So go to planar mapping, which is projection mapping, by the way. Planar is just looking through a very flat surface at an object. In this case, I'm using the camera, and by default, it's x-axis. I want to use the camera and hit apply. So I took a picture of the box. Now I use a workflow called seaming. Okay, and that's taking a seam and dictating where the seams need to be, as far as me taking an X-Acto knife maybe and choosing the edges I would need to cut in order to unfold the box. In this case, the standard edges are right here for a box. Now, over time, you'll learn that those are the edges you use just for a box, and you'll get really savvy at seeing what edges need to be highlighted. So I'll use some examples here, but for right now, let's choose these edges and hit cut. So after you cut the edges that you need to unfold it. Okay, there's two different ways to unfold it. You can choose this one, and it unfolds it. That was it. Perfect, right? Let's undo that. There's another method, and that's this one, Smooth UV tool. So highlight the UVs first, click on the tool, click and drag on unfold, and you can see it happen real time. But you can also see that it's sideways or jacked up. So what could we do? Well, that's where layout comes in. We can go to layout and go to rotate free and hit apply. That laid it out for us. So whether you choose what? This way, the unfold, or the UVs, this one, and unfold is up to you. Again, some scenarios are easier here, and some scenarios are easier here. Let's look at our example over here, the more complex object. Let's take a picture of it, planar mapping, and let's figure out where we need to cut in order for this to have the least amount of seams. It would be nice to know where we cut, so I'll click on this button. And let's think about a box for a second, right? So in this case, right there, there, and there. I would have to think about this box coming off the other box. So there, 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 all the way around. And I don't get greedy, I just cut those. So now I can't see where I cut, even though I had that button on. And that's where this comes in handy. Custom polygon display. And you could choose the apply. So now you could really see where you cut, which is really nice. Okay, now let's continue to cut this out. And we have to think where we need to cut. Let's cut there. Okay, then here and here maybe. And I have to think about surface direction. This is where it starts to get a little fun until you practice. So I'll cut here. And you can always try this out. Let's say I click on the object and hit unfold. Ew, that's a hot mess, right? So I obviously need some more seams in order for Maya to figure it out. If I undo that and go to UVs and choose the other method, unfolding, I can kind of clearly see what it's having a problem with. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of these edges right here. There we go. We had this one, no problem. It unfolded great. This one, however, didn't unfold so well. Now, if we need to know which one this is, we can go to face and highlight all the faces. But we first have to go back to this, the move tool. So this is the bottom shell, and this is that top box. So somewhere in here I have to provide it one more seam in order for it to unfold correctly. Maybe right here. And there we go. Now in order to lay these out, again, I hit the automatic mapping, but you see that this is just a little bit crooked. So that's where layout comes in. Apply. And it's still a little crooked, right? So as I said, there's some things that, especially within Maya, that we have to be wary of. That doesn't make it a perfect workflow every time. So layout square box. Yep, and so it's just Maya cannot calculate for that degree. We would have to manually dictate the degree. Control right click to shell and rotate that. Sometimes that happens, especially with complex items. Is there an absolute value you can type in? No, unfortunately there's not. You know, like I can't go in there and say 90 degrees because I didn't know my first degree. Therefore, if I changed it, if it was like 12 degrees and I changed it to 90, I need my original rotation in order for that to work. So in this case, if I can get it straight enough, I can now worry about direction, and that looks all good. And then sometimes after you get it just almost perfect, Maya can figure it out. But not often. All right. So that's the unfolding method. And that one's used a lot too. But if I need to, like, let's say move something, just know your other method. If I need to, like, let's say move this by cutting it, UV to shell, W, and move it over here, I can now, because I know the other method of stitching it back together, I can just hit edge and then move and sew it. Okay, sometimes you have to do that. All right, so we've looked at complex items, simple items. Now I want to go into a super complex item and show you how that works in the next video.